As Christmas draws near, the holiday season typically brings joy and celebration. However, for the European Union, EU, the festive period appears to be marred by an impending economic crisis that could threaten the region's stability. Europe, it seems, has found itself trapped in a precarious situation, struggling against both internal challenges and external pressures. In fact, the situation is so dire that it raises the question, who needs enemies when you have allies like the United States? For more than 2 years, the EU economy has been battered by various factors, ranging from rising energy costs to increasing geopolitical tensions. One of the most prominent issues facing Europe today is the severe deindustrialization happening across the region. Germany, the EU's largest economy, has been hit particularly hard. Major German corporations, including multinational giants like Volkswagen, are increasingly shifting their operations abroad, particularly to the United States and China. These corporations are either closing factories or implementing drastic cost-cutting measures, signaling a deepening crisis in the German industrial sector. This troubling trend is not just about corporate decisions, it's about the long-term implications for Europe's economic health. Since 2014, capital has been fleeing Germany at an alarming rate. On average, 80 billion euros have been leaving the country annually, primarily in the form of private investments. As the situation worsens, it appears that the largest EU economy is on the brink of industrial annihilation. But the worst may be yet to come, thanks to the policies of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Despite the EU being a NATO member and a U.S. ally, Trump's trade war tactics have been anything but friendly to Europe. The European Union over the years has made it increasingly difficult for American businesses to operate on its soil. In retaliation, Trump has made it clear that the U.S. will impose heavy tariffs on European goods, especially cars. His administration's stance is simple. If Europe wants to send its products to the U.S. without paying significant tariffs, they will need to comply with America's demands. Trump's economic strategy targets the EU directly, and this is evident in his demands for Europe to purchase more U.S. oil and gas. Under the threat of tariffs, Europe is being forced into a corner. Trump has made it abundantly clear that Europe must buy U.S. energy at exorbitant prices or face severe economic consequences. The primary commodity in question is liquefied natural gas, LNG, which has become a critical element of Europe's energy supply. This situation places Europe in a difficult position. The EU has been trying to distance itself from Russian energy sources due to geopolitical tensions, and now it finds itself facing an even more expensive alternative. LNG, particularly from the U.S., is significantly more costly than Russian gas, and it raises serious questions about the long-term viability of Europe's energy strategy. In 2023, the price of LNG in Europe was already 2 to 3 times higher than it had been just a few years earlier, and this trend shows no signs of reversing. As the EU grapples with the soaring costs of energy, Trump's leverage grows stronger. His tariffs are not just about trade, they are a means to force Europe into making difficult choices. The reality is that Europe's energy sector is facing a crisis of its own, with the costs of production already high. Adding tariffs to this equation could push Europe's industries to the brink of collapse. The EU may be forced to make a choice between paying for expensive U.S. energy or facing even higher production costs, which could cripple its industries further. The economic impact of Trump's policies goes beyond just energy. Europe's currency, the euro, has already seen a significant decline against the U.S. dollar. Since 2021, the euro has depreciated by more than 6%, and if Trump's tariffs are implemented, the euro could weaken even further. This would make European imports more expensive, further inflating the cost of living for ordinary Europeans. The European Union's reliance on the U.S. for energy has grown significantly in recent years. Currently, the U.S. supplies 15% of Europe's oil imports, and in the third quarter of 2023, the majority of Europe's LNG imports came from the U.S., surpassing even Qatar and Russia. Trump's goal is to increase Europe's dependence on U.S. energy to the point where it becomes impossible for the EU to turn back. Europe would essentially be at the mercy of U.S. energy companies, paying inflated prices for LNG while struggling to maintain its industrial base. From the U.S.'s perspective, this represents a significant opportunity. The U.S. is now the world's largest exporter of LNG, surpassing Russia, Qatar, and Australia. In 2023, U.S. exports outpaced all other countries by over 14 billion cubic feet per day. With Trump pushing Europe to buy more U.S. energy, American energy companies stand to benefit tremendously. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, has projected that U.S. LNG export capacity will continue to grow in the coming years, with North America's LNG export capacity set to quadruple by 2028. This expansion will provide even more leverage over Europe as the U.S. secures its position as the dominant energy supplier. While the U.S. stands to gain from this arrangement, it is essential to recognize that LNG is not a cheap commodity. The process of liquefying natural gas and transporting it on specialized ships is expensive. Furthermore, the method of transporting LNG results in some of the gas being lost during transit, further increasing costs. For Europe, this means that even if Trump removes tariffs on LNG, the high production costs may negate any potential savings. At the heart of this confrontation lies the stark reality that Europe is stuck between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, it cannot afford to continue relying on Russian energy, but on the other hand, the U.S. is offering no affordable alternatives. The cost of living in Europe, particularly for energy, has already become intolerable for many people, and the situation is only expected to worsen as energy prices continue to rise. The current crisis in Europe is not just an economic issue, it is a geopolitical one. Trump's demands for Europe to increase its reliance on U.S. energy are part of a broader strategy to exert control over the region. By forcing Europe to pay higher prices for energy and imposing tariffs on its exports, Trump is creating a situation where Europe is at the mercy of the U.S. economy. In addition to economic pressures, Trump is also exerting military leverage. He has demanded that NATO nations, including EU members, contribute at least 5% of their GDP to defense spending. This demand, which directly targets the EU, adds another layer of financial strain to an already struggling region. For many EU countries, this is an impossible ask, as the costs of meeting this demand would be prohibitively high. Looking ahead, 2025 promises to be a particularly challenging year for Europe. With the U.S. continuing to impose tariffs and demand greater reliance on its energy supplies, Europe's economy is likely to face even greater difficulties. As the EU's industries struggle to compete, its currency weakens, and its people bear the brunt of rising costs, the future of the European Union appears uncertain. In conclusion, Europe is facing a perfect storm of economic and geopolitical challenges. From rising energy costs and deindustrialization to the looming threat of U.S. tariffs, the EU's economic stability is in jeopardy. As Trump tightens his grip on Europe's energy supply and demands more from NATO, it remains to be seen how Europe will navigate these unprecedented challenges. The road ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: Europe is in for a tough few years.